everybody, today we're going to be talking about large language models and how they work. Here we can see a picture of a Terminator-style robot saying, "How am I supposed to start a robot apocalypse when you keep making me write term papers?" And that's a reflection of the idea that ChatGPT is being used for things like writing term papers or writing other kinds of documents instead of being used for taking over the world. And that's probably a good thing. By now, I'm sure that you've all heard the term ChatGPT, even if you haven't had a chance to use it. So you might be wondering what ChatGPT is. ChatGPT is a large language model, which we'll get into here in just a minute, with capabilities to write different kinds of documents, to summarize texts. It can do some computer code writing. It can take tests with a fairly good score on those as well. And the responses sound human, they sound sentient, but in reality it's just a bot that's using patterns to form answers that would appear plausible to other humans. So there are a few things that ChatGPT is not. It's not sentient, there's not a human at the other end of what you're doing. It's not reliable. There are a lot of hallucinations that happen when we're thinking about using ChatGPT, and those hallucinations mean that it might build something that looks like a very good reference, but it turns out that that reference is actually non-existent. It might be for the journal Nature. It might be for an author who actually has written for Nature. It might even be the title of something that sounds plausible to show up in the journal Nature. But when you go out and actually research that reference, you find out that it doesn't exist. It is not unbiased. There are a lot of different problems with how the large language models were trained. And we do see bias cropping up from a Western, white, Christian perspective. And that's something to keep in mind as well. And it's also, if we're using GPT 3.5, the original version that is in the free version of ChatGPT, it's not able to give us a whole lot of information after 2021 unless you're using certain plugins. If you're using GPT-4, which is the paid version of ChatGPT, or you're using some of the other programs, then you may be able to get information that is more recent than 2021. There are a number of pitfalls and problems with using ChatGPT. First off, it's often at capacity and not accessible, and that is for the free version. If you're using the paid version, there are some different accessibility problems that may occur, and you may find that it's accessible at certain times of the day more than it's accessible at other times of the day, so that's something that you might have to play around with if you do need to use it. The writing can be stilted, boring, grammatically correct, but not factual. So you might get sentences that sound really good, but don't actually say anything or don't say anything of value. Again, coming back to the incorrect answers, the hallucinations, it may tell you that Abraham Lincoln was talking about safe web usage. Obviously, Lincoln was born before the web was invented, so you would know that that's something that's incorrect. But if you were looking up a topic that you were not familiar with and you were getting a number of hallucinations from ChatGPT, you might not be aware that those things are fake. So it's very important for you to check any source information or output that the AI gives you to make sure that it's actually factual. And then it was really interesting, back at the beginning of 2023, CNET got into a lot of trouble because they were having AI write articles for them, but they didn't tell the readership that the AI was writing those articles. And then they had to go back and fix the articles because so many of them had problems in them. So readers were very upset that they had been misled into reading AI information and that the information was incorrect. There are some more problems and pitfalls that we want to talk about. There's no guarantee of privacy for any questions asked. If you are using free versions of any of the AI programs, then their terms of service may specifically indicate that they are going to possibly keep the questions that you ask and the responses that the AI give back for training so that the language model can get better at understanding human communication. If you're using one of the paid services, you'll want to check those terms of service to see how they handle privacy and see if there's any better guarantee. For students, if you're using something like ChatGPT or any of the AI programs, then that may be considered cheating. You'll want to clarify with your instructors for each assignment and within each class to know whether your instructors are okay with you using AI in specific instances, if they're not okay with it at all, if they want transparency in how you use it and when you use it. Just check and find out what your instructor is interested in. Coming back to the idea of racism, sexism, and bias, we already talked about that there is a Western bias simply because the language models were trained in the West. So if there's any output that you get or response that you get from the AI that is maybe concerning to you, you might want to double or triple check it from other sources and make sure that the information that you're getting does not contain that bias when you use it to put together an assignment. And then thinking about how the OpenAI was trained, they used Kenyan trainers and they asked them to look at the most disturbing content, so both written and graphic disturbing content, to decide if it actually was disturbing or not, so that they could help the AI to not perform certain tasks or not allow certain commands to be followed. There was an article that was written about that, and I do encourage you to read more about that if you are interested in how the model was trained. Now I want to change tacks just a little bit and look at how we can actually spot AI writing in the real world. And this article is from earlier in 2023, and there have been some updates and changes, but the ideas behind the concept are still relatively the same. So with a model like ChatGPT, it gets a sentence or it gets some words. It takes the question that you're asking and it puts it into context. And it considers the words that might come next as it builds the sentences. You can see the example here with LeBron James is an, and then it has to decide what you are. And you can look at the article from Keith Collins. I've included it here, and you can see in more detail how this works. So continuing with this same example, LeBron James is an American, and then what comes after that? ChatGPT assigns a score to each of the options that could come after the word American to show how likely it is that that word is going to come next based on all of the text that it has scraped from the web. So it's looking to see what a human would most likely say next in this instance. In this case, ChatGPT picked American professional, and then it's looking to see if there is something else that might come after that, and it again scores the options and picks the one with the highest score based on the question that you've asked, and again, how it has scraped the web and what it considers to be the most likely word to happen next. Then the article goes on to discuss a list of words that ChatGPT has available to it to determine which words are most likely to appear and what words are more likely to be used by humans or less likely to be used by humans. This special list helps AI detectors to know what patterns and words to look for. Some AI programs have discussed using a watermark so that the output would clearly show that it is written by a bot. Savvy consumers could copy the text and remove the watermark, but they would be potentially less likely to know the words on that special list. This means that a detector could possibly still realize that the text was bot written. However, at the end of the day, AI output stands to get better and better, and we've seen that already so far in 2023. This means that detectors end up waging a losing battle with the AI output. And this leads me back to the concept of learning to work with the AI, teaching and thinking about it as a critical tool rather than as a replacement for our own work. In these final slides, I've added a number of resources that you might find useful to you. Most of them are websites. There's a book that I've included as well that has some chapters that I wrote. There were a number of folks who participated in this book project, so there are a lot of different viewpoints that are being represented, and I think that it's a great resource for people to look at and think about as they're working through learning how large language models actually work. So you might take a look through this list of resources. All of the sources that were used in this presentation are also included at the end of this, so that if there are any sources that you are more interested in looking at for further information, then you can follow those as well.